Welcome to the Storytellers podcast. I'm your host, Peter Lewis. Welcome back to the Storytellers podcast, everyone. Hope you've been enjoying season 2 so far. We have a special episode coming to you today. And before I jump into that, I actually wanted to share something that's kind of cool. So last episode we had a buddy of mine, Nick Hawthorne, come on, and we talked about songwriting, travel, and specifically one interest we share, which is Japan. Now, I don't find any coincidence in this that today's guest is coming to us live from Japan itself. This person is someone who I look up to greatly. They've been a major inspiration to a lot of the things in my life. They also just happen to be my older brother. Please welcome Dan Lewis to the podcast, everybody.
Hello.
Greetings.
Hello.
How's it going?
I'm all right. I think your listeners are going to have an issue trying to distinguish our voices because I think
I know.
we sound very similar, I think.
That was the first thing I said is like, oh God, no one's going to know who's talking.
I can timestamp my voice before if you need it. This is Dan.
I'll need everything.
Yeah.
I'll just try to sound like you. So you have a really interesting perspective right now. You know, part of the me starting a podcast was being locked up in quarantine. And so I've been doing this for a couple months now. I'm already in season 2. What has Japan been like for you? Like, how's quarantine going? What sort of stuff's happening over there? How has that been, you know, from a different country's perspective for you guys?
Japan, we are almost back to normal-ish. I've not been in the United States at all during the COVID pandemic, so I don't know how to relate. But my experience over here in Japan is we're starting to go back into work in the offices. We have a decreased staff. Obviously, I think we can only have a maximum of 30% staff on premises, and then after that, everyone has to work from home. Everyone wears a mask in Japan. There's no but in Japan, wearing masks was always a thing, even before COVID, because allergies and stuff. A lot of people just walk around with masks on. Now everyone does it. For example, me and my wife went to an illumination last night because it's getting into fall and winter, and we looked around. Before we could even get into the illumination, when we drove up in our car, there was a guy at the ticket booth, and he like took our temperature with a thing, and he was like, you had to wash your hands, and they're like, if you don't have a mask, you're not allowed in. Because we didn't have a fever or anything like that, we were able to go in and enjoy. And then in that, they have limits of how many people can be in that park at once. So it's almost back to normal. Going to restaurants and things, it's similar, where you walk in, and if there's tables open, then you go to one of the open tables, but there's always a table open around it. It's very kind of back to normal-ish, but it's not as crowded, and it's not as congested as it is. But no, I mean, as long as you're careful in Japan, there's only, I think, for example, yesterday in Japan was one of the worst days we've had in a long time, and there were 200 new cases in all of Japan.
Wow.
That's the level of corona that we have. Yesterday was one of the worst days we've had in months, and it was 200 cases, not for just where I live, for all of Japan, 200 new cases.
Dang. Well, I think part of that too is just it's so congested over there. You guys have a ton of people in small areas and cities.
No, but considering for example, Ohio, yesterday had 10,000 new cases.
And
just Ohio, 10,000.
200 only.
200.
Dang.
So we have less than I think less than 5,000 active cases of COVID right now. But it's easy to kind of keep Japan isolated. It's an island, so there's not a lot of people coming in and out unless you're coming by plane. It's different. It's very different from the United States. It's not as easy accessible. It's not as big as a population as the United States. But I mean, yeah, it's just you wear a mask, you be quiet, you be careful, and you stay away from people as much as you can. And a bad day is 200 cases. So that's how COVID's going over here right now. It's almost back to normal, I think.
Yeah, that's impressive. One thing that I thought would be really interesting about this episode is you yourself. I mean, you grew up with me in Ohio, nothing really special, but your story from just the things that I've heard is actually really interesting, and you kind of caught a break bigger than most people do when they're coming out of college. How, I guess the question I want to start with, why Japan and how did you get there?
I was a music major in college, and then music became work, and I switched over to history. And history was very interesting. And in history, you have to study, world history and things, and you have to pick your focus eventually. I took a bunch of art history classes and things, and eventually I hit Japanese history with like samurai and all that stuff. And I had never really like I kind of knew about it as a kid, and I kind of watched like Dragon Ball Z and whatever was on Tsunami, Toonami, yeah, whatever was on Toonami at the Cartoon Network was what I was watching. I watched like a little bit of Cowboy Bebop, but really everything was just Adult Swim, nothing outside of the ordinary. I wasn't like a big anime or manga nerd in college or in high school, or even as a kid. But when I started studying Japanese history and going through, there was a specific phase called the Sengoku period, where basically when all of Japan was at war with itself, kind of like you can consider it like the Japanese Civil War if you had to relate it to U.S. history. I thought that was really interesting. And then I went back from there to the Heian period of Japan, which is when Kyoto of Japan was the capital, and all this it was like the Renaissance period of Japan where there was just like new writing and Chinese influence was coming into Japan. I thought it was super interesting. And we had to read the original texts from Japan, like some really integral pieces of Japanese history. Some of them were called like the Tale of Genji and the Tale of the Heike. Then there was some old history stuff like the Nihon Shoki. These are really specific history terms. I don't expect anyone listening to your podcast to know these unless they study Japanese history.
Probably not. No.
But basically, it's like where the gods came from in Japan for like the Shinto religion and stuff like that that's in Japan. And I was reading them in English, and I was like, you know what, this would be really interesting to read these in Japanese eventually. So towards the end of my college career, the last 2 years, I took some classes in Japanese just to learn it. And I thought it was really fun and it was really interesting. So I was a history major, but I was studying Japanese so I could read the original texts. And then, honestly, I think it was about 2 weeks before I graduated, one of my Japanese teachers was like, Dan, you want to go teach English in Japan for 2 years? I had no job lined up after college. I didn't really know what I was doing, so I was like, do I want to go to Japan to teach English for 2 years in 2 weeks? Hell yes, I want to do that. So at that point I was like, okay, well, I don't even have a passport. Like I had nothing. I was just like, well shit, I have to now prepare to leave the country for 2 years in a 2-week period of time. And I was like, all right, well, I'm 100% doing this. So I quit my job. I went into Walmart that day. I was like, I'm going to be out of the country in 2 weeks for 2 years. So I'm done. I'm done here. I quit all that. I left everything out. I put all of everything I owned into 2 suitcases and a backpack, drove myself to the airport. I gave you my car. I was like, here's my car. There it is. Like, I can't pay this anymore. You get the old Chevy Cobalt. And I just left the country. And it wasn't like an English teaching job that you would get from there's a couple really popular programs called like JET. It's like a Japanese education something. I honestly don't know what it stands for, but I have a lot of friends that work for like high level stuff in JET. There's another big program over in Japan called Interac, which is also really good. I have a lot of friends in that, but I had no connection with that. What mine was my college Japanese teacher. I won't use his name on this because I don't know if he would allow me to use his name, but he still is a very, I talk to this guy still sometimes. He's an absolutely major impact of my life as well. And he had a friend that runs his own small English school in a place in Japan called Gunma Prefecture, which is like a very small rural area of Japan, kind of close to Tokyo. But like, there's Tokyo, and right outside of Tokyo, it becomes like nothing for a long time. And that was what Gunma was. It was like in the center of Japan, farthest from any ocean of this island nation. So in the middle of nowhere. And basically their English teacher, their contract had run out, and they needed a new English teacher like soon. And the school term in Japan starts in April. And that was right about the time I was graduating college. So it was like, we need you over here on April 1st to like do this. So I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I get over there, and this school wasn't any like big program or anything. It was called, in Japanese, it's called a juku, or a cram school. And that, like, people after they're done with school, they go to these cram schools and they learn English and math and stuff like that. There, it's kind of like just tutoring afterwards. That's what I worked at for 2 years, and I taught everything from kindergartners to like the oldest student I had was this like 86-year-old dude that would just come in and you'd speak English to me. He was like a doctor. He was a surgeon, like the most brilliant man I've ever met. And he would just come in. So I taught everything. And I didn't have any real like teaching experience. I was kind of focusing on teaching English towards the end of college as well, but I didn't really have a lot of time. So yeah, I just got this golden opportunity to like come to Japan, teach at this school. Basically, I don't have any curriculum. They were just like, we just need you to talk. Like you could do whatever you want at the school. It's a really great experience. And I came in and I just started doing that. And that's how I ended up coming to Japan. There wasn't like, I want to go to Japan and teach. It was like, no, I just kind of wanted to study the language, to learn how to read a book I was reading in history. And that snowballed into me working in Japan for 2 years as a teacher. Yeah, it was interesting.
So first of all, the story itself, it's incredible. I mean, I can say I was there because, we're brothers, and I got to see you off in some of that, though. One question I did really want to ask, and this is something I have with a lot of friends, and especially for friends that travel, culture can be a huge, huge shock. And so you, for being someone who basically never really left the state, apart from like little things here and there, like we did our drum competitions and stuff, have you at that point been international anywhere before?
No. I bought my passport and went to Japan. I'd never been outside of the United States. Yeah, I'd never been. I like saw Canada once when I went to Niagara Falls. I was like, "That's Canada over there." That was about as international I'd ever been until that point. I went down to Florida a couple times for like going to Disney World and going to the beach and stuff like that. I'd gone to Chicago heaps of times to visit family and hang out over there. I still have never been to New York. I've still never been to California.
Same.
I've still never been to Las Vegas. I've never been to, like, basically I've been to Chicago, Columbus, Florida, and Niagara Falls, and then everywhere in Japan. Like, some people are like, "Have you been here in America?" I'm like, I love that. That's my favorite thing in Japan is people are like, "I've been to this place in America. Have you been there?" I'm always like, "No, I've never been there. I have no idea where that is." Like, what? You're from America? I'm like, yeah, I know, but I've never been outside of like Ohio. I didn't have a lot of money growing up, so we didn't like. I wasn't able to travel everywhere.
What a conversation piece that you have. So for you, I mean, you had obviously studied Japan and you had learned about the language and some of those things. Do you have any stories of like your first time getting culture shock where it's like, wow, I just insulted someone by accident, or like, oh yeah, this is the coolest moment ever that I've ever had with culture? This is
it. This is the number one culture shock I had. And I have been living in Japan now since 2013. Right now it's 2020, years. So almost 8 years now. It's coming on my 8th year. So I moved to Japan, and I have not moved back to the United States. My passport, I have 3 years left on my passport, but I'm planning on renewing it and staying over here for longer. I have a house and everything over here now, so I'm not planning on moving back. So
yeah, you're basically plugged in.
I'm plugged in now. This is where I'm going to be until I die, assuming. But so being here for 7 years, obviously there's a lot of culture shock that I can't remember now, and it's just become normal. So like when Mom has come out, she came out for my wedding, then she came out for just about once every other year to Japan, and she'll see something, I'm like, oh yeah, that's totally alien for you now. I forgot that that's so crazy for you. But for me, I will never forget the biggest piece of culture shock I had was maybe the second time. No, it was the second time. The second time I had ever gone to a bathhouse in Japan. The second time I went to a bathhouse in Japan was I was still an English teacher at that time. I'm not an English teacher anymore. I work for a company now in Japan. But during the time where I was an English teacher, I was teaching this woman and her daughter English because her husband was already going to the United States to work. And they had a 2-year contract that they had to go, in like 4 years, they were going to go to the United States and live in the United States and work. So I was teaching her that family's wife and that family's daughter kind of important daily English, like how to buy food and like how to do this, like just kind of
The
function.
conversation,
And,
yeah.
and not even conversation, just like how to, like literally, if you need to go buy something, like how do I say buy this, or how do I give directions, or how do you
Okay.
get
So
directions, like
really, really basic.
life uh, essential English is what I was teaching, very basic stuff. And she wanted to say thank you. She wanted to say thank you to me. Her husband came back from the United States to help them move to the United States. So he came back from America after being there for a couple months. They were getting all their stuff together in Japan to ship over to the United States to live there. So to say thank you, she was like, I want to take you to this bathhouse by our area. So they came and picked me up. The whole family came and picked me up. And I was in a position where I couldn't really talk to the husband. Like he was driving and she was up front, so I was like not in a good spot to talk to him for a while.
Yeah.
And then we get to this bathhouse, and I'm like getting ready, and it's like, oh God, so like, but I still can't really talk to him. So we like go into this bath, and now it's like I'm totally naked. This dude I've never met before is totally naked. I'm in a bath with him, and he was like, "So what's your name?" Like I introduced myself to him completely naked in the same bath with him. That's how I was introduced to this guy, and I was like, "This is not something that would happen in the United States." But apparently, that's like a very common thing in Japan. Is even after work and stuff like that, you'd go with your buddies or just like your friends to a bathhouse to relax, and it's all naked. It's all, but it nudity in Japan isn't the same kind of stigmatism or kind of embarrassing thing as it is in the United States. It's just like, yeah,
Yeah.
this hot spring feels really good. Let's go.
So I
That
can't
was probably
remember
the
the
biggest
name of
culture
it.
shock.
That's one of the greatest stories. Just introducing, like, "Hi, I'm
Naked in a
Dan.
bath.
Here's
So what's your name?
everything."
Okay, here we go.
Isn't there an actual word for that in Japan though? Like I was watching a documentary and basically they said like when you're at a bathhouse, it's and correct me if I'm wrong. It's relax. It's we don't talk about salary and politics. It's basically the phrase has the meaning of when we're naked, we're all the same.
Yeah,
Like
I don't know if there's an actual term for it. I've never
okay,
heard a specific term for it. I could be wrong. I just might not know that term. It seems
hmm
very specific. But I don't know if that's the idea that when we're naked we're all the same. I mean, I'm sure there is some of that, but it's basically like there's nothing to be ashamed of. Like
yeah,
you are also just a person like me. Like why would we be ashamed or embarrassed of ourselves? Like obviously, you shouldn't. Like, they have mixed baths and stuff like that in Japan. They're not as popular, but no, it's just you go to a bath and you relax. Like it's the cleanest you'll ever feel. And the whole point of going to a bathhouse is to recycle the water in your body. So you go into these
hmm.
hot baths, you go into these saunas, and you sweat, and your body is releasing this water. And then you drink more water, and you kind of cycle through the bad water and get the bad water out, and you put the good new water in, is what the theory is that I've been told. And when I think about that, when I'm at the bathhouse, that's a very relaxing thing to me. Is I'm just kind of like cycling through the water in my body, and it's I have been to so many bathhouses now with so many people that it's not even a little bit weird for me anymore. For example, I have a good friend in Japan. One of them is from Michigan, and one of them is from New Zealand. I
Oh
talk to
wow.
these guys a lot. They're my foreigner friends in Japan, and I talk to them a lot, and they're a lot of fun guys. They're really fun, and I have been to a bathhouse with both of them, and we were like, let's go to this bathhouse, and we went, and we were just talking about video games and stuff like that, but we were all at a bathhouse just naked in a bath talking. And it's weird to say like your image of us in a bath is probably like the bath at your mom and dad's house, that little like tub.
Yeah.
It's very different. Like these are huge baths that are like the size of like a small pool, like a pool at like a personal pool or something like that, or a natural spring, or like a big hot tub. And you just go out and you relax. It's like steaming hot water, and there's like great scenery around all the time. It's great. Like that's probably the biggest culture shock I can remember
hmm
from coming here. Is just that the whole bathhouse experience and the whole experience of just nudity in general in Japan. It's just not a big. No one really cares about it. It's just like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
you're naked now. Enjoy.
So apart from that too, culture itself, Japan, they love. I mean, bathhouses. Like I've seen lots of things. You've always sent pictures and been like, check out this cool place I'm at right now, or look at this. Um, how does that fit in with like? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, what have you really enjoyed about kind of becoming Japanese? And what have you been like, wow, I really miss this about being in the United States? Like, do you have anything that are like trade-offs where it's like you kind of like this in Japan better than America, or anything where you're like, wow, I really wish this was something that I still had over here?
No, that's a good question. One of the things that you had said in your question is becoming Japanese. I don't feel like I'm becoming Japanese. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I'm just still Dan. Like I'm just still I'm the exact same guy that you would have met back when I was in the United States. It's just I've experienced a lot more weird shit now, just like from being in a different country and going through like these weird experiences and everything. I've just learned a bunch, but I don't even feel like I'm so much like American. I'm not even so
Mm.
much like Japan. I'm just Dan. I'm just Dan, and now I'm over here. So I don't. There's nothing necessarily that's like I feel like I'm becoming Japanese. Just I wanted to make that I want to make that point from the way that you had worded the question. But to
For
answer your
sure,
question,
yeah.
um, food wise in Japan, food is great over here. I love Japanese food, but sometimes you just want like tacos or like a pizza, and all pizza in Japan is always like corn and mayonnaise pizza. It's just like what is this garbage pizza? I don't want to eat this. So I don't really like the pizza too much. Some of it's really good. You can get like great Italian pizza, but I don't know. Me and you are from Ohio. We have like a different like it's pan pizza or like
Yeah.
Chicago deep dish and stuff like that. Like that's the pizza I want to eat, and it doesn't exist in Japan. The closest you can get is Costco pizza, which isn't great, but it's not terrible. When you have to
Not the
when you
best.
either have corn mayonnaise pizza or Costco pizza, 100% of the time you go for the Costco pizza without any question. Things I like about Japan, it's basically I don't know how. I mean, you drink a little bit, but like there's open carry in Japan basically everywhere
Mm.
for alcohol. Like there's nowhere you can't have alcohol basically if you're not operating a vehicle. Like if I'm, for example, if I get on a public bus and I open a beer, it's not against the law. Some people in the bus might be
Wow.
upset. They were like, "Oh, that guy's drinking in the bus," but it's not against the law. You can drink on the trains, you can drink outside, you can drink while you're walking down the street. I just like that because I can go to a public park with my friends on a nice day. We can find this corner. And it's a big popular thing in Japan. Like my company will do this. Well, we'll have something called hanami, where you go and look at flowers that bloom in the spring, and you just go with the dudes at your office, and you sit down and you open some beers and you drink outside, and then you go around and you just kind of bar hop the whole night. It's so much fun. That's a great piece of culture here. I like in Japan how you're not reliant on a car. So I can drink and then
Mm.
you can come home by train. You don't need to operate any vehicles. It's not dangerous. It's very safe to like have a nice night and to be able to get home safe and no one's drinking and driving. I like that a lot. Some of the things about the United States that I think are interesting is I don't know. Again, the food is the biggest thing I miss about the United States. Japan is safer than the United States. It's the safest country in the world. I think Tokyo is the safest city on the
Wow.
planet. There's like almost no crime. If I leave my house in the morning to go to work and I forget to lock my door, I'm not worried about it. To be quite honest,
Hmm.
it's not a big issue. I live in a good area. Um, it's safe. You could walk at night. Children walk to school and walk home by themselves. Walk. And little
Really?
kids, I'm talking like third graders with like helmets
Wow.
and stuff, will walk by themselves down just long roads all the way home, and it's not even a little bit weird. It's not even a little
That's
bit looked at like, oh,
crazy.
that's dangerous. It's just safe. It reminds me of like old school America that you would see in movies, like when all the kids in like high school or middle school are like walking to school. That's
Yeah.
how it feels in Japan. So just the safety of Japan, the kind of camaraderie of the neighborhood. We have a big a festival every year in my neighborhood that I join in, and it's in the summer, and you just kind of get together and drink. We didn't have it this year because of COVID. They said,
Mhm.
even though the cases are so low and everything, they were like, let's not do anything, let's wait. So they canceled it this year, even though there are zero confirmed cases in my whole neighborhood right now. They were like, let's not even chance it. Let's just stop doing it.
Keep
Let's,
on the
let's be
safe side.
careful.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are fun. Like it's community. I feel like really when you're here, you're a community. Not all foreigners have the same experience. I think some people come here and
Yeah.
if you don't speak Japanese, it's hard to kind of get into the community. I live in a small area. I'm the only foreigner in probably, oh my god, a while. It's there's no other foreigners in my area. If I'm kind of
Hmm.
like you know where I am. Like there's no one else around the area that's 6'4"
And
and a white guy.
do
So
they
you
do
see
they
me
like
walking around.
hold you? Do they treat you like that? Do you feel like a foreigner being there still, or do you feel like
Oh,
you're?
that's a good question. That's a really good question. It depends. At my company, no, I don't feel like a foreigner anymore.
Mm,
You have to kind of have an in, is what I've learned. Someone Japanese has to vouch for you and be like, oh no, Dan's fine, Dan's okay. And if one
mm,
person vouches for you and says like, oh, you're okay, then you're in with that group. And then if that group
mm,
connects to another group, they'll in for you again on that next group that you kind of branch out into, and like, oh no, Dan's okay. So like you have to kind of get an in, but after you have that in, you're in. I'm never going to be looked at, even if I changed my nationality to Japanese, even if I
mm.
did all of that, I would never be looked at as an actual Japanese person. Where in the United States, if I change my nationality to the United States to an American, it's like you're an American now. Welcome to America. Like you might be an
Mm.
African American or an Asian American, but you're an American nonetheless. At least when I lived in the United States, that's what it was. In
Yeah.
Japan, I can change my nationality to Japanese. I would still be that American guy. Even if I had a Japanese passport, I would be that American guy because I don't look the part. So it depends on what you mean by like, do you get treated differently? No, because I have an in, they treat me normal. Because I can speak Japanese, they don't have to like kind of try to fight with me. I'm just in the conversation with them, and I don't really get issues. If I'm going somewhere new for the first time where no one knows me, people are very standoffish. Like it's like, oh, there's
Mm.
some guy here. As soon as I start talking, they're like, oh, geez, okay, great, welcome in, and then it's fine. So like it's a little bit of a fight, but I've gotten so used to it after 7 or 8 years. Like it's no big deal anymore. It's a good
That's
question though.
awesome. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, what we're going to do, we're going to take just a quick break here, but then I have one more question I want to ask you and kind of get your opinion on for our listeners. So we will be back in just a moment to hear a little bit more from Dan. Let's take five. Welcome to 5 Minutes with the Host. So, in this segment, we usually like to take some time to talk about some of the other things that are happening in the world of the storytellers with me, your host. So, I don't know about you, but I had a phenomenal Thanksgiving break. I ended up getting to have a meal with some friends of mine. We cooked some incredible food, had some incredible drink, and it was just so much fun to sit around a table to talk and share what we're thankful for. I don't know if you've had the experience yourself, but if you've never sat down with someone and had a meal with them, it's one of the best ways to learn about who someone is and what they enjoy about life. There's something really special and really sacred about doing that, just gathering around a table with food and having good conversation. So, coming out of this season of Thanksgiving and thankfulness, today is a very special episode because this is being launched on Giving Tuesday. So if you've never heard of Giving Tuesday, it was actually created in 2012 as a really simple idea, a day that literally encourages people to do good. Over the past 7 years, it has grown into a global movement that inspires hundreds of millions of people to give, collaborate, and just celebrate generosity. So whether it's making someone smile, helping a neighbor or a stranger, showing up for an issue or people that we care about, or just giving some of what we have to those who need our help, really, every act of generosity counts, and everyone has something to give. So, what I wanted to talk about today is a friend of the Storytellers. This is a nonprofit organization who is run by a very close friend of mine. He's actually someone who's a big inspirational part of the Storytellers being created. And this nonprofit is called Take Courage International. So, if you've never heard of them, Take Courage International does two things. They meet needs and they unlock potential. So Take Courage is primarily based in the country of Honduras, and they exist to change the future of children and leaders around the world by doing those things, meeting needs and unlocking potential. So they right now are currently involved in a lot of the disaster relief that's been happening in Honduras. If you haven't followed the news, recently Honduras was hit by some horrible hurricane weather, and it has caused just destruction over there. So Take Courage themselves, they are actually a nonprofit that is centered around sponsoring kids and raising money for them so they can thrive in underdeveloped communities. And they've been doing this again for about 4 years now, and they've raised close to $50,000 for these children. They have someone on the Honduras side, totally full-time, who is always making sure that these resources and these generosity gifts are always making sure that they're being utilized properly and being spent on the proper things. So the reason I wanted to talk about them is, again, Take Courage has been run by a friend of mine since its creation, and Honduras really needs some help right now, especially in this Thanksgiving season. While we are celebrating and enjoying the things, which there's nothing wrong with that, just like on this Giving Tuesday inspiration, there's always people who have need. So especially coming around the corner with Christmas and the rest of the holiday season, if you find yourself with a little bit of extra cash and want to participate even in today, Giving Tuesday, Take Courage International is an incredible organization who's doing incredible work around the Honduras area, in several of the major cities. And I can vouch for them personally and say they are a friend of the Storytellers. They need some assistance, and they are doing some of the most incredible work on the planet. So if you're interested in participating in Giving Tuesday, Storytellers is doing a shout out to Take Courage International. If you have something you'd like to give and contribute to the Honduras relief, head on over to takecourageinternational.org and take some time on their site. Look at some of the testimonies that they're receiving from the children. Go to visit their Instagram, Take Courage International. And if you feel inclined to, give and donate to the cause that they are currently serving out in Honduras. So that is all I have for this segment of Take 5 with the host. It's been great chatting to you guys. I hope you've had, again, a great Thanksgiving, and that you really take this moment to seize generosity and say, yeah, I'm going to give to Take Courage International because I know they are making a huge difference, not only by serving a community, but effectively rewriting the stories of less fortunate children in Honduras. So thanks for listening, and we're heading back to Dan. Welcome back, everyone. We have been enjoying the company of Mr. Dan Lewis on our podcast today. And Dan, it's been really great having you. Thanks for taking time to come out beyond this podcast, just to share your experience. And what I wanted to ask, I have one question that I've been kind of formulating in my head since we've been talking, and I would love to get your opinion. And I think we have a lot of viewers, at least a lot of the people who listen to this, they're about my age, so they're kind of like mid-20s to mid-30s, kind of that area where you can make some big life decisions. So the question I want to ask you, and you can take as long as you want to answer, what would you say to the people who were in similar situations to you? Maybe they're at that point where they graduated and they have the opportunity to go and be an expat somewhere where it's like, hey, I'm going to move across the country and go be in a totally different culture. What would you say for those people, or just any other people in those similar situations making big decisions? What's the best advice that you have for someone like that?
Do it. Reason is the worst case scenario is you're going to learn something. You're going to learn about a different culture. You're going to learn about the hardships that you have. For example, I grew up as a white male in Ohio in the United States. So there's a lot of privilege that comes with that. There's a lot of advantages that I had. And I never really had to deal with discrimination or racism or any type of kind of ceilings or anything like that. Me moving to Japan has had some hardships. I've experienced some racism over here against some people. I've felt as a minority in Japan. 99% of Japan is Japanese people. 1% is other, and I am part of that other. So it's been very eye-opening to experience that level of being a minority in a different country. Do I dislike it? No, absolutely not. I bought a house here. I'm married. I'm going to be living here until the day I die. I absolutely love Japan. I think it's a great place to be and a great place to work. And working is very difficult here. If you don't really have a lot of oomph to like put in a lot of hours at a job, you can't work in Japan. It's just the culture is different. But to answer your question, absolutely it's a good idea to go out and see other things than what's right in front of you. Again, as we talked at the beginning of this podcast, I grew up in Ohio without ever really leaving Ohio, besides going to other places that I knew. And then I have been to all over Japan, and I went to Korea once as well, just with Yuki, with my wife, to visit Korea. And that was an interesting place because I'd never been to a country where I couldn't speak the language. I knew a little bit of Japanese before I came to Japan, so I was always able to communicate at some fundamental level. When we went to Korea, I don't speak any Korean. I don't know any words. I don't even know how to say hello in Korean. And if yes doesn't communicate yes, I don't know how to say yes or no in Korean as well. I know zero words of Korean. And I went there for 2 days. It was great. It was interesting again to see this new experience of like, I actually don't know how to communicate at all in this country, and to experience it and try that hardship. So if you are thinking about traveling after college, I think it's best to get out of the United States. Definitely leave the United States, see somewhere else, even if it's Mexico or even if it's Canada. That's just, if you can't speak any Spanish, still go try to do Mexico. It's close. It's not so expensive to go there. If you really are afraid of a language barrier, then go to Canada. It's just different. But I honestly, my best advice is go somewhere that you're uncomfortable with. Flex out of your comfort zone, learn something, have an experience. And I mean, you're either going to absolutely love it, or you're going to learn something and come back and be a different or an improved or just a more experienced person from it. So absolutely, definitely travel if you've not.
Well said. Well, thank you for that. Alrighty, well, that is all we have time for today. I just again wanted to say thank you again. If people are intrigued by your story, you do a lot apart from just live in Japan. We've done some podcasting together. We haven't really gotten into it, but the culture of gaming, like we both do a lot with that. You have some of that too. So if people wanted to at least get in contact with you or just see some of the stuff you do on your free time, where can they find some of those things?
YouTube. I have a active channel on YouTube. I usually put out a video every day. Usually it's me playing StarCraft 2 or some other game or something like that. Or again, as you had said, we do a podcast called Mom's Basement, which comes up usually fairly regularly weekly. Sometimes there's a week or two period where one of us, of the four of us that do that podcast, can't come in. But my name is Danberg SC. SC stands for StarCraft. So if you look up Danberg SC, you'll see usually the picture. If you don't know StarCraft, the Zerg emblem is my mark. And check me out there. I have videos that come up every day. Right now I'm playing through old video games like Deus Ex or Dead Space or something like that, just as little 20-minute clips. But if you're interested, then you can find my videos there. I don't do a lot of talking about Japan. This is just something that I kind of live, and it's just my daily life, so I kind of escape that and play video games when I get home. And so if you're interested, come and check it out.
There you have it, everyone. My older brother, Dan Lewis, podcaster, gamer, guy who moved to Japan and is totally fine being naked. What a guest of honor.
There it is. Totally fine being naked. It's Danberg in a nutshell right there. Thanks, Pete. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Storytellers, and we will be back for more. Happy storytelling, everybody. Thank you again for listening to this episode of the Storytellers podcast. If you've enjoyed the podcast so far, head on over to anchor.fm/thestorytellers, where you can listen to more episodes as well as support the podcast. The Storytellers is available on most streaming platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many others as well. If you want to stay up to date and see all announcements on upcoming Storytellers episodes, head on over to Instagram and follow me at the handle IamPLewis. Thanks again for listening.